What is Buddhist meditation? I'll give a quick introduction to the kinds of Buddhist meditation that are probably the most known and popular coming right up. So I'm Doug Smith. I'm study director at the Secular Buddhist Association. That's secularbuddhism.org. If you're new to the channel and interested in living a wiser and a kinder and a calmer life, consider subscribing. So this video is going to be basically an introduction to the topic of Buddhist meditation. For those of you who just don't really know what it is, who may have heard about it, who may have heard about meditation in general and different schools of meditation from different backgrounds, and this we're going to talk about just in a sort of an introductory way the main kinds of Buddhist meditation that you might encounter if you go to any kind of Buddhist center to do meditation, or want to do it yourself, or want to read about it. So that's going to be the kind of topic here. And I'd be interested in whether any of you have your own meditation experience or practice at all, and if so, what it is. Do you think of it as Buddhist? Do you think of it as something else? Perhaps it's MBSR, that's mindfulness-based stress reduction. We'll talk about a little bit of that coming up. So yeah, put it down below in the comments. I'd be interested to hear. So basically there are three main types of Buddhist meditation. And those are going to be calming meditation, mindfulness meditation, and loving-kindness meditation. And I'll take them one by one. The first is going to be calming meditation. And this is really the heart, and as well as being the start of Buddhist meditation practice. So how do we do calming meditation? Well, we find a quiet place, a place where we can perhaps sit. Usually it's done sitting. It can be done lying down or standing up. And basically it's got to be comfortable, a place where we can maintain a posture for a certain period of time, however long we want to meditate, without moving around too much. So we want to sit comfortably in a way that's not rigid, but that's got a certain dignity to it. Usually it's helpful to close your eyes so that you're not getting too much stimulation through your eyes, or close them at least part way so you're not looking at things. And at that point, what you want to do is to focus on your breathing. And you want to focus on it in the place where it's most apparent, where you feel it the most. And for most people, that's going to be at the nose or at the belly. And so while you're breathing, you focus on the breath going in and the breath going out. And it's a gentle focus. You don't want to be too rigid about really focusing in, but a gentle focus, not too tight and not too relaxed, somewhere in the middle. And just follow your breath. Either it may help you to repeat to yourself inhaling and exhaling. For some people, it helps to count the breaths. So they'll count them from 1 to 10, and then they'll go back to 1 again. Whatever you find most useful. But what you will find almost immediately is that while you're paying attention to your breath, within a very few seconds, you'll find that your attention has wandered. You're thinking about something else. You're thinking about something that happened yesterday, something you have to do later on today, something you have to do tomorrow. Your mind will wander in all kinds of ways. And when that happens, you want to sort of gently and calmly bring it back to the breath. And that is the practice. It's a practice of repeatedly doing that, of finding where the mind is gone and then bringing it back to the breath. And if you've lost track of your counting, just begin at 1 again. You don't have to do counting. Counting is simply one way of keeping the mind a little bit more attentive. For some people, it works. For other people, it's a distraction, and they don't find it useful. So do whatever you find works for you. And over a period of time, what you'll find is that this kind of a practice of simply following the breath as it regularly comes in and goes out tends to calm the mind. And as it calms the mind, it tends to quiet down the kind of internal chatter that we normally have. It may only calm it down a little bit, but we'll find that it does tend to calm it down. And when we notice that, we'll notice that a lot of that internal chatter is kind of repetitive or obsessive kinds of concerns and worries about whatever's going on, either what happened in the past or what's going to happen in the future. And so by focusing simply on the present moment and what's going on with our breath, we're sort of getting out of that chatter, and the chatter tends to calm down. And that alone can bring a kind of relief from a certain kind of mental suffering that happens when we're obsessively worrying about things. And simply by bringing this kind of relief, so it can bring a kind of a joy. A kind of a joy can arise within us. But now let's turn to the second kind of Buddhist meditation, which is perhaps the most famous nowadays, mindfulness meditation. And mindfulness meditation is where we basically engage in a non-judgmental awareness of the present moment, which will remind us of what we've just been doing with calming meditation. And indeed, that's quite apt, because usually we're going to do mindfulness meditation after a short period of calming. So we'll start by calming, we'll start by following the breath, focusing on the breath, until we get ourselves to a kind of a calm state. And then we may turn towards this sort of open awareness of the present moment in all of its manifestations. So we've just become aware of whatever's going on in our experience right now, whether it's a sound that may have occurred, or a smell we may smell, or some kind of a feeling in our body, perhaps from the way we're sitting, perhaps something is hurting us in our body, perhaps there's a nice feeling of a cool breeze. Whatever it might be, that is what we should attend to. And we attend to it itself, but also we open our minds and simply attend to whatever arises within the mind. So we aren't simply paying attention to, let's say, physical sensations, but also to mental feelings. So if we hear perhaps some kind of loud noise, and that makes us irritated, then we also pay attention to the irritation. We simply are aware of it. We're not trying to judge it. It's a non-judgmental, at least we're trying to cultivate a kind of non-judgmental mental state. So we're simply aware in a non-judgmental way of the fact that, we have some irritation here. And so we're paying attention to all of these things, sort of like they're the furniture of the world. It's sort of like we're sitting and we have certain kinds of sensations arise within experience, and also certain kinds of mental feelings and states and memories and future kinds of musings that arise in our experience. And we're seeing them all as just sort of objectively, as kind of the furniture of the world of things that arise and pass. And so that is kind of the way we approach meditation. And in particular, we may also make ourselves aware of what's pleasant and unpleasant within our sensations, within what's ever arising. So we'll notice that certain kinds of experiences, certain kinds of mental states are pleasant, and other kinds are unpleasant. We just simply be aware of that. We simply be aware of the positives and the negatives. We're not trying to judge it, we're simply just aware of that aspect of it as well. And as we practice this kind of mindfulness, we'll come to understand of certain kinds of mental states that are skillful, that tend to lead to positive outcomes or making us happier, and other mental states that are, let's say, unskillful, that tend to lead to negative kinds of outcomes, that tend to make us feel pain or feel more painful or more unpleasant. And that kind of back and forth, or that kind of two-sided nature to experience, will become part of what we practice with. And which leads to our third kind of Buddhist meditation practice, which is loving-kindness. And loving-kindness practice is one, perhaps the most important of a suite of similar practices that aim to cultivate beneficial or skillful kinds of emotional or mental states within us. And the other two practices I've done are really can be seen as kind of passive practices, where what we're doing simply is sitting back and paying attention. In this practice, in loving-kindness practice, it's a more active practice. We're making an effort to sort of foment or make arise certain kinds of mental states that are more useful or more helpful or more pleasant, frankly, in a beneficial way. They're not simply pleasant, but they're also useful to us in daily life. And there are several different practices within loving-kindness. Perhaps the most famous recently involves doing what we might call a kind of a mantra. So while you're seated in meditation or lying down, whatever, you say to yourself internally, without speaking usually, may I be happy. May all beings be happy. May I be healthy. May all beings be healthy. May I be free from harm. May I be safe. May all beings be safe and free from harm. Things like that. It's not, the particular words we use aren't as important as the point that they're trying to get across, which is expressions of kindness, expressions of well-being, both for ourselves and for the world. In fact, for all beings, all things together, without really separating out. That's the general aim. And so by repeating these kinds of mantras to ourselves, these kinds of phrases to ourselves, over time, we can help to foment, to sort of generate these kinds of emotions within ourselves, emotions of kindness towards others or towards ourselves. And so what we want to do is to end up in a place where we can sort of broadcast, at least from within ourselves, feel like we're broadcasting these kinds of feelings of kindness towards the entire world, or towards parts of the world, one after the other, so that we're not leaving anybody out. It's not meant to be a magical practice. It's meant to be a practice of cultivating internally mental states that make our lives better, and make the lives of other people better as well, insofar as our kindness can impact them beneficially. And these are practices that we should consider doing regularly. I would suggest doing them every day if you have time, for however short it might be. Maybe it's only 5 minutes, maybe it's 10 minutes, maybe it's half an hour, whatever you can manage on a regular basis. It can be useful. It's like exercise. In the same way that if you do exercise once a month, if you go to the gym once a month, it's not likely to have much of an effect, and if it does, it's probably going to injure you. Similarly, if you do meditation practices once in a blue moon, you're probably not going to get much out of them, and they're going to tend to be frustrating. So if you're going to want to get something out of these, I would recommend setting aside some period of the day where you can be in relative quiet, even if it's just sitting at a desk in a relatively calm environment and closing your eyes for 5 minutes. That might be enough. Whatever it is, I would recommend that if you can, do some calming practice, do some mindfulness practice, perhaps do a little bit of loving kindness practice. These things on a regular basis can have good effects. Now, from a historical basis, I just want to put in a couple of words here. Some people may be interested in what the history of these is, and of course, it's a long and complex history. There's a lot to these practices. But what's at least interesting to know is that probably the only practice that's really original to the Buddha is mindfulness practice. The other two predated the Buddha, almost certainly, because in the early texts, the Buddha mentions people from other belief systems having the same loving kindness practices that he had. And probably he got it from the same people they got it from. And similarly, calming practices within the Indian tradition go way back and seem to have been quite common in that part of the world, these practices of focusing on the breath and calming oneself down. So as I said at the beginning, I'd be interested to know what your own meditation practice is like. Do you have one? And if you don't, why not? Do you not have the time for it? Many people don't, or feel that they don't. But other people may, if they really wanted to, carve out a certain part of the day. Have you been able to do that? And what kind of practice do you find yourself falling into? So thanks so much for being here. Thanks to all of you, all the new people here. Thanks to all of the subscribers of the channel. It's wonderful to have all of you watching these videos and I hope getting something out of them. Thanks to my patrons on Patreon. It's wonderful also to have your support backing up the channel. And I hope that we'll catch you on the next video. Meanwhile, do all of you be well.